So let's talk about Appwrite's real-time feature and better understand how all of this works, what services we can connect to, and I want to explain to you how to make this connection from the client side. It's actually quite simple, so by the end of this video, you should be able to understand this entire process and be able to add this into your own apps. So at a high-level overview, Appwrite's backend emits these events anytime a change is made. And it's not just to the database, it's to any service within the backend. So if you update a document, add it or delete it, if a user creates a new session, updates their account, or registers for an account on your website, if a file is changed in a storage bucket or a function is executed, all of these actions within your Appwrite backend emit some kind of event. On the client side, what we can do here is we can listen for these events, and this connection is made via WebSockets. So when a change is made in your backend, you can actually represent that change on the client side in real time. So whether you just want some live count updated in your UI, so if something changes like some product stock inventory, or you want to build a chat application, this is how we can listen for these changes and actually represent this and create real-time apps. So the way this works is once your backend is set up and your client side is configured, let's say we've already downloaded the client SDK, we've configured it, we want to go ahead and actually tell Appwrite what specific services we want to listen to. So in this case, just for this demo, I set up a blank application. I added in a database called prod, that's the database ID, and two specific collections, and I have messages here. So I have products and messages, and at some point, I am gonna actually listen for changes to this message collection here. So on the client side, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use the client instance. So this is where we make that initial connection, and I'm gonna call the subscribe method. Once we call the subscribe method, we need to pass in two key parameters. The first one is going to be a channel, and think of this as a channel like a TV channel or a radio station or a YouTube channel even, where anything that happens within that channel, you get the notification and you basically listen for what happens and that data transmits to you. So if you're watching TV, whatever is on that channel, you receive the information there. So you create a channel, and this is going to be like your database or your file storage, whatever that might be. And the second parameter is going to be the function. So anytime an event emits, we want this function to be called. In that response, we're going to get information about that particular event, the item that was affected, and basically any details that we need to modify our UI. So let's start with the channel here. So if we go into the documentation, and this is going to be linked up in the video description, we have all the channels we can connect to here. So I want to explain this and break this down a little bit. So at a high level, we can go ahead and subscribe to a channel like documents, which would mean any database, any collection. When something happens, we get this response, we emit this event, and we listen for that. If anything happens with our users, so anytime a session is created, a user changes their name, updates their account, we can listen to that. Same goes for our storage buckets. The files channel, anytime something happens within any of our buckets, we can catch this and basically get those events. So that's the high level overview. And we can also subscribe to multiple channels. So this can also be an array right here, and we can subscribe to more than one channel. So we normally wouldn't want to subscribe to every change. What I want to do here is I want to subscribe to a specific collection within a specific database. Now, we can basically construct a channel like this. So here we have the channel where we can say databases. I want to listen for the prod database. Then I have collections. I specify the collection ID. And this says anytime something happens within this specific collection, then I want to get these events. So I want to listen for messages, but I don't want to get updates for when a product is updated, for example. So let's go ahead and construct that. So we can just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to grab this and paste it in. And this is going to be the channel. So the database ID is prod, and I want to listen for messages here. So we can even go more specific here. So let's say I have some kind of product page here where I want to display the live count of the current stock of the product. So I have customers shopping, and I want them to see that the product is going to be running out soon. So we have 2 items left in the inventory, and anytime someone buys the product, I want that number to go down. So I need it represented in real time. So what we could do is we can subscribe not to just a collection, we can subscribe to a specific document within a collection. So we would go into database, specify the database ID, the collection ID, and then the document ID. So this is that granular approach. And the same goes for buckets. So we can subscribe to a specific bucket with its ID, or we can subscribe to a specific file within the bucket. Same goes for functions and so on. So that's kind of the idea of constructing these channels. It's very important. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and console out this response here. So we want to get this response, and now I want to break down the second part. So the function that executes, what happens within that? How do we process this information? So I'll just save that, and I already have this application set up here. And what I'm going to do here, and we're not going to see the UI actually update because we don't do anything yet. We're just consoling this out, but I actually want to see this payload here. So let's go ahead and write a message here, and I'll just say hello, and I'll hit send here. And I have two different screens open here, so we can actually see that whatever happened here in real time was emitted within a different page. So any user that's on this page would get this event triggered on their side. And for now, we're just consoling this out. So no UI updates were made at this point. So here's going to be that entire payload here. And let's break this down here. So we can go through this, but what I'm going to do is dive into the documentation and explain each section here. So the payload itself. So what happens in that response? The first thing is going to be an attribute called payload, and this is going to be the object. So in this case, it's going to be the message. We created a new message, and now we're going to actually receive that message. If this was an update event, then we would see the new representation of that specific message. So the item itself. Then we get some kind of timestamp. That one's self-explanatory. And then the next one is going to be the channels. So these are going to be all the channels that were affected by this event. So if we scroll down here, we see that channels attribute right here. So in this case, we were subscribed to a specific collection here. So that's why we got the event. But anybody that was subscribed to documents or to this one right here, where they basically listen for the actual document itself with the document ID, everybody that was subscribed to these channels would have gotten this event. So it's just telling us where this was emitted to. Now for the last attribute, this one looks a little bit more confusing than it actually is. It is important, but I'm going to try to simplify this. So basically, when some kind of event occurs, there's all these different variations of this event. So it's granular. You see that there was a database event, and then it tells me there was an event in this specific database, and then it goes into the collection and so on. So what we really want to do is we want to know what type of event it was. And if you go to the top level, this is going to be the most accurate representation of what just happened. So in this case, it's the database. And for this example in the documentation, the database ID, the collection ID, the documents, and then the actual document ID, and then the action here. So the solution that I would use here is we can just create a condition here. So we can just say if, and then we'll just create the response here. So we have the response, we'll get that object here. We'll go into the events array, and I'm just going to get the first item here. So it's the first index right here. And I'm going to say if the events array, and I have cursor here, so it's trying to fill this in, but if this value includes the string of create, then we want to go ahead and perform a certain action. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and trigger the add message function. The add message function here, we don't need to worry about the details. Basically, it updates my state. I'm using React, and it's going to go ahead and take this payload and update my UI. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and hit tab, so cursor is going to auto-complete it. If I delete an item, it's going to trigger the delete event. So basically, we're going into that response object. We're pulling out the actual event. So if this was a delete event, it would say delete here. If this was create, well, that's what we saw there. We're just pulling that string out. So we have the events themselves. Once we get that event from the channel, then we can perform an action. So if I save this, I hope you can understand that right there. We simply get the event type. And then now if I go into my UI, I'm just going to refresh this. In theory, I should be able to actually get these values here. So I'll just send something here, send it, and then there we go. Both values are updated, and that's how we're able to connect to on our client side. So in our recap here, we basically called a subscribe method, specified the channel, pass in a function, and process the event itself. So that does it for this tutorial. Hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video.